So what an honor to be here. This is Digital Davos 2023. And what a privilege for me to introduce, well, actually, I do a horrible introduction. So I'm going to actually let Lawrence introduce himself. So Lawrence is, I say, one of my, not my favorite movie producers of all time. I mean, Pulp Fiction, An Inconvenient Truth, Kill Bill, this is off the top of my head, Reservoir Dogs, Jackie Brown. Those are some of my favorites, but not all my favorites, but a lot of my favorites. Good. Lawrence, thank you for joining us. And Sam Saunders, prolific golfer. Give a little better intro than my horrible intro.
Well, I'm not a golfer, but that's the other Sam Saunders. I'm an advertising creative. I'm a writer. And I've been in the advertising creative industry for about 20 years and worked in New York for about 15 of them. And I'm a creative in the sense of commercial advertising output. So very different, I guess, to Lawrence, who is much more in the sort of the motion picture field. I'm in the 30-second to 60-second field, but also in the sort of big idea creative field. So big ideas that might last 2 or 3, 4 or 5 years in a commercial sense versus something that is just a 30 to 60-second kind of thing you might think is sort of traditional in the advertising sense.
You know, we are so hopefully going to dispel the myth that creativity is an output or externality from specifically artists, right? The reality is that we are all creative. And what I define creativity as, so my role in my businesses is I am part hit maker and part creative theoretician. So I teach creativity to global leaders, and then I make hit records with artists such as Lady Gaga, right? So I don't fit in the mold, right? And when I think about movies and making movies, so it is extraordinarily complex, especially after speaking with Lawrence, and the intricacies of raising capital, the intricacies of helping navigate artists, actors, crews, Quentin Tarantino, from ideation to global hit is extraordinarily complicated. Lawrence, would you walk us through one of your favorite scenarios of leveraging creativity? How you thought, beyond, hey, this is what I learned in film school versus this is what I learned by doing.
Wow. All right. Well, thank you. Stephen Hawkins said once that, we live in this unlimited, this universe that goes on forever, right? And we're this tiny little dot in this universe. But the one thing, and he as humans, we're so tiny, but the one thing that we have that is unlimited is creativity and inventiveness. So everyone, as you said, everyone can be creative. Everyone can invent and reinvent. And whether you're doing 30 seconds or let me shut that off, or long form, or you're in any other field. It's like, what does a producer do in a nutshell? Like Good Will Hunting is a good example of, so basically what happens is we're presented with an idea, a script, a life rights, a book, a magazine article. And the idea of a producer is to take a story and ultimately help guide that into a movie. And so in a nutshell, I work with writers, and on Good Will Hunting, I worked with Matt Damon, Ben Affleck for quite a bit on that script. In that case, then it was time to find a director, and I had to convince our financier at that time, Harvey Weinstein, who the director should be. That was Gus Van Sant. It took a while. And then ultimately he financed it, and we went ahead and made the movie. So it's different every time. Sometimes I have to go out and raise the money. Sometimes it's the people who the studio who wants to make the movie in the first place. So it's a little hard to go through every scenario, but in a nutshell, what we do as producers is kind of soup to nuts, from idea to basic screenplay, to packaging, to raising the money, to actually oversee making the movie, to the release of the movie.
Managing personalities are as diverse as you can get, right? So, and also this is cordic element of you can't control the elements, right? You could only navigate or steer or nudge, right? So how do you manage? And I call this creativity, right? Essentially, because there is no rule book as to, you know, with this for type A you must do this, with type, you know, B beta you must do this. How do you manage expectations? How do you lead in the space of chaos? And how do you think creativity helps you do this?
You have to breathe a lot. Because there's so many parts. It's like an instant thing. All of a sudden you're it's true, you know, the creative process, you never know where it's going to lead you. You know, from my point of view, I'm always trying to make something that's rich, that's with strong filmmakers, with strong characters, great actors. Basically what I do as a producer, I support the talent. I was just with a famous producer the other day, Bruckheimer, who produced Top Gun, and it was a little thing honoring him. And he said, my job is to support talent, and I'm lucky enough to be able to pick great talent and support them. And I've been able to support them into making movies. And so, yeah, you have to create an environment where the stuff that's stirred around somehow comes out and a stew that you know is tasty. I don't know, maybe that's not a great analogy, but
Oh, that's right. So we talked about this the other day. So people don't know this, but we had some I consider really meaningful, inspiring conversations. One particularly, which you were sharing, we were talking about shifting culture with art, and you know, some you know, we're in the trenches. I make music, and so I'm in the trenches making music, and so I don't see or predict the externalities, right, of the results of creating content that indirectly or directly shifts culture or gets people thinking, right? So your movies have definitely done that, and also tasty, and it's a really unique choice of words because they're extraordinarily like it's hard to capture the essence of how impactful your movies are, but they're so much fun. And it's like the seduction of like getting you to think, right? So if you have to think, you're not only shocked by the surprises and like every turn, but also the context and this historic continuity, and also doing things that previous to, let's say, Jackie Brown or Inglorious Bastards, like you do not predict this coming. I'm like,
right. Well, there was a movie I did. Actually, we were in Davos in 2005 or 6 with Al Gore. I saw Al Gore do a slideshow about global warming, you know, in 2005. And I was sitting there with this well-known writer, director, Scott Z. Burns, watching this. And I looked at him, I said, this is a movie. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, this is a movie, watching Al Gore do a slideshow. And I had this, you know, like instinct vision, like, okay, we got to make a movie out of this. And however, it was Scott. And so it's funny, I didn't know exactly what that movie was, but I just knew it was. And Scott had this really great idea about what to do with it. So sometimes you have this instinct and you don't know exactly what it is. You have this vision. And as you're saying, and then it just kind of, well, we had this amazing team, and that was a culture shifting moment when Inconvenient Truth came out. We actually went to Davos with Al Gore, and he spoke there, obviously, and that was a documentary that we made.
And that speaking of culture shifting, so that was arguably one of the most impactful documentaries of all time, and specifically because it put documentaries really on the map. Right prior to that, to that documentary, there was you know, I don't think TED Talks were at the forefront of the popular ethos.
Not yet. Michael Moore had made a couple of big documentaries, but Michael Moore's documentaries are they're like entertainment. They're amazing. So he had a couple big hits, but that was it. There wasn't a lot going on, and that did popularize documentaries. I think
And maybe that's what it is. So that actually, what I mean, changed ethos and changed culture and shifted is that indirectly or directly led to more specific and concrete evidence-based documentary, or at least case-based documentaries, which is entertaining but also thought-provoking and challenging, right? Like this almost your a lot of your work, which I love in the sense of it forces you to create an opinion, right? If you didn't have one prior to that, right? Even though it's maybe like that opinion can be, obviously experiential, but then you'll do your own research, but at least it's inspiring in that sense, right? So thank you for that. So speaking of inspiration, Sam, so the future arguably of the way the next generation consumes content is short form, right? We're seeing this play out online, social media, et cetera. And short form is a bit of a struggle from the traditional sense of creating long form content, and how people like Lawrence and myself have been used to creating content. But knowing that the next generation is very, I wouldn't say short attention span, it's just that they're being homogenized to think, to create short form content to deliver the messages. So one thing that you can say with short form content, such as the TikTok 30-second video, not even 30 seconds, like 5 seconds, right? 5-second videos, is you have to be succinct about your messaging and your purpose and intent. What's your opinion on this revolution of the short form content via the distribution mechanism of social media?
Yeah, good question, Anand. I mean, for me, what I've always the rule that I've applied to myself and everything that my teams have always come up with is literally the 5-second rule. So what I do is I have this can't see my hands, but I have this rolling 5-second so imagine every 5 seconds you need to capture and hold someone's attention, but that 5 seconds isn't a 5-second chunk. It rolls on and on and on and on. So my 5-second rule should, in theory, capture the audience's attention for 2 hours if I wanted to. It's not about very, very short form content. It's about capturing and maintaining attention, in my view. So what I've found with a lot of brands, and even a lot of I guess platforms who have tried to play in this space, is that they're just not appreciating and respecting the short attention span of the customer or the participant or the audience, whatever you want to call them. And you see this in advertising, long form being 1.5, 2, 3 minutes. In film, it's a bit different because you've got a bit more of a captive audience, but I would also argue with streaming, it's easier just to X out and go into something else. So capturing one's attention and seducing them from that first point, and then holding that and maintaining it's really important. Of course, in long form, in advertising, it's way more important because you're being advertised to. So the 5-second rule, where you are continually entertaining, and this can be, it doesn't have to be entertaining in the sense of like it's funny or whatever. It can be an edit. It can be like a zoom out versus a zoom in, showing you something you've already seen, a zoom out, giving you new information. There are lots of little tricks that we do, at least that I do with my teams, that really help to maintain that attention and keep you keep the audience holding on to what you're communicating. And I call the 5-second rule.
So this is really interesting. So how would you, without, I think one access that we have now for the general populace, right, that we didn't have before, is distribution, right? So essentially, if you have a message and you want to get it out, the best bet is to really study or become familiar with what marketing is, and specifically what marketing is in the new generation. And so, did you ever consider that what you're doing as a writer and working in messaging, right, in marketing, that would have a high value, as high of value prop as ever in the history of marketing?
Well, it's a really good question. I do. I mean, I think the way we used to communicate in the advertising realm when I was growing up has changed completely. I think it's gone up, so sort of upside down. What we used to do is we used to say, here's a brand, and here's what the brand needs to communicate to these people. What we now do, what I now do more so, and what I think brands should do more of, is they turn the camera around and say, what do my audience yearn for? What do they yearn to hear? And what is going to get them to hold on to this little bit of rope I've thrown out there for the next 30 seconds or 90 seconds? So I would call it sort of like an applied empathy, Anand, where, there's, and I think, Lawrence, of course, knows with the film, especially working with Quentin, there's, what he wants to tell people they listen to. In the advertising world, it's the exact opposite. It's like, what do people yearn to hear from me and my brands, and how can I serve that up in a way that gets them to watch, seduce them into the message, and then make them take an action to further them down this funnel that we call this purchase funnel, where it starts out with awareness and ends up with some kind of an action like a purchase or advocacy and so forth.
Very, very good point. I love a bit of your checklist, because it's something we can all use as we think about our impact, our missions, and our drivers. Without being effective at your messaging distribution, understanding who your audience is, it becomes very difficult to articulate your mission and purpose, right? And the whole point of articulating your mission and purpose is to connect us together, et cetera. So thank you for that. Shifting gears, one of the things that I postulate and when I teach global leaders creativity, specifically creativity as a skill, is that creativity indeed is something that we can all do, right? So when you think about creativity as, only the artists do, or et cetera, I think that's a huge disadvantage to the general populace, because that myth we're debunking in real time, and knowing that we're here at a singularity point with AI, right? We have, ChatGPT, we have for music, OpenAI Jukebox, right? Which is getting to a point where it's starting to make sense for musicians to use as a tool. And obviously, you have ChatGPT doing great revisions of code, updating code. You have copy done through ChatGPT really well. What's your belief, Lawrence, in one, creativity as a skill, in the sense, what do you do? What's your daily practice? Is there a daily practice? Or when you're stuck, how do you leverage creativity? How do you kind of kickstart, besides coffee, how do you kickstart a brainstorm, an idea, convey that to your team, therefore afterwards? So two-part question. Do you have a specific practice when you're not inspired? And two, how do you stay in the zone, or how do you get into a creative zone as a daily practice?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. By the way, it's interesting because when I'm watching a movie, because Sam's talking about the rolling 5 seconds, right? And when I watch a movie, I have friends who are like, if I'm 30 seconds late for a movie, I won't walk in, because to me, I need to watch what the first shot is. When I'm watching a movie, to me, the first shot is always so indicative of what the filmmaker is going to say and do in the movie. And I'm always fascinated by what that opening shot is and how the director is choosing to bring you in. So anyway, I feel like, although it's very different in long form features, it is that to me is always a hook. But in terms of creativity and how do you, it's sort of it's like this. If you're an actor on a stage in the theater on Broadway, doing a show 8 days a week, you cannot depend on feeling creative, right? Because, you know, you could have just had a fight with your girlfriend or boyfriend, you could have, you know, be feeling not well, you could just not be inspired, but you got to get on and go ahead and perform no matter what. And you got to kick ass and give a great performance, no matter how you're feeling, whether you're inspired or not. And the only thing that keeps you going and makes you get into the zone is doing it, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're inspired or not. It's the actual act of doing whatever it is you're doing, and it's really discipline. So to me, of course, my whole life is not about being creative. It's drumming up material. It's working with creative people. But what really inspires me personally is when I'm working with creative people and I'm working, say, on a piece of material, and I'm working on a character and we're talking about the backstory, whatever. So to me, it's like almost like being in therapy sometimes. You know, we're talking about how something goes from A to B to Z, and you kind of get into that zone, and it's quite fun and it's inspiring. I'm just inspired usually by the person who's across the table from me.
Well, you're surrounded by extraordinary talented people. You're also very inspiring. I firsthand know that being around you is there's like a field of energy of which, you know, you want to, you know, we're like neotenists, right? We have this kind of, I think in similar way, I have this I'm like a grown child, right? And I'd never want to lose that. And I think you have more of that than I've seen in quite a while. So I think that's, for me personally, that's very important to
That childlike quality, I think, is what keeps us young and what keeps us going. I have a friend, a dear friend, I like to be able to say, his name is Norman Lear, who's 100 years old. And he's as curious as I think he probably was when he was a child. It's just that, and when you talk to him, it's like you smile because you go, oh, it's such an inspiring thing to be around someone like that. And so I can't say I'm Norman Lear, but I strive. That's what's inspiration. I strive to. It's a reminder, being around people like that.
Fantastic. I agree with you. You're legendary, but you're also very kind and very inspiring to be around. Sam, what's your daily practice, and what's your belief in creativity as something we can all look at learning as a skill, right? And the importance of creativity in the future of everything we do.
Yeah, so I mean, I kind of gave myself the challenge a few years ago. I became a creative and a creative director and a chief creative officer in the advertising world without any training. And the people I worked with over the years really didn't give me any intel or training at all. You sort of figure it out on your own in this world that I came from. So I gave myself a challenge about probably 2 or 3 years ago. I thought to myself, can I create a creative out of someone who is absolutely not creative by giving them a certain set of skills, a certain set of questions, a certain process that could get them to a really big idea in advertising. And I put this my theories to test in a 2-day workshop with Khan Lyon in Egypt in 2020, right before the pandemic. And it was an incredible success. And it really shocked me because I always thought, well, I'm this weird guy who has these weird thoughts, and I come up with these ideas that come out of nowhere. And that's true. But I have come up with processes that allow anybody to come up with ideas that are actually really sticky, potentially groundbreaking, business changing ideas. And it just requires, I think, Anand, one to be able to sort of ask themselves certain questions and to look at a problem in a certain way that is not potentially the way that you would ordinarily look at a problem. So, and this sounds very uncreative to even say this, but I think there are ways for us to all be creative, given the right processes and asking oneself and others the right questions to get to an answer that's really interesting.
This is great. So it could have been a better segue for exactly what I teach. So specifically, creativity as a skill is, and I say this as a lot of my opening conversations is when people say, "What, creativity really a skill?" Yeah. So is intuition. So is instinct. And what I love showcasing is, and this is just a very simple comparative analysis, is what has given us access to our limbic, what has given us access to our unconscious. So we get 2 years of therapy to get at least a glimpse of our access, right? If you're a follower of Jung, into our subconscious and unconscious through therapy, right? If you're a meditator and you do TM, you have 2 years of practice before you get to an entry space of where you're accessing your unconscious and limbic spaces, amygdala, etc. In a pop song, you have 2 minutes and 20 seconds now, and you're crying. Right, you're in touch with a part of you if listening to the right song in which you grew up or had where your worldview has changed to the song you just listened to, because when you were 7 years old, this song resonated with you prolifically, right? So that's an incredible, I think, value proposition that we have been given to the traditional creatives in the art world. And so what I'm excited about is the future of the understanding of what creativity really is, right? It is a skill that can be learned. And on a very similar note, Lawrence, when you think about how brilliant Inglourious Bastards was, right? I love that film, right? And how different, right? Can you walk me through just a glimpse of what those conversations were like, and how creative you have to have been to not only pitch some of these ideas with Quentin, et cetera? Can you give us an idea what that was like?
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, Quentin, is he's such a force, a creative force, right? As an auteur, in the sense that he writes and directs, and it's his vision. So my job with Quentin is to support him, of course. Okay, so he, when he gave me that script, he'd been working on the script for, I think, like 10 years. And he finally cracked it. And we were in Las Vegas at his birthday with him and Fergie. And it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And he says, "I'm writing." And I didn't realize that meant like he was almost done. And that was in April. So on July 3rd of 2008, he calls me up and he basically says he has the script. And I have my BlackBerry, and I'm on the phone with him, and he goes, "You think we can make Cannes," which is in May, the Cannes Film Festival. And so by most standards, it would be impossible. So I counted out the weeks, and I said, "Anyone's going to tell you this is impossible to do, but if you want to do it, we can do it. It's just going to, it's going to be a challenge every step of the way." He said, "Well, give me 2 days because I just finished the script." And we sat down on a Sunday. So it was July 4th. That was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We sit down, and all day long we plot out how we're going to do this. And 13 and a half weeks later, we were shooting. That's from the day he gave me the script. 13 and a half weeks to do a $75 million movie in a country we never shot before. And on that day, we decided we're going to shoot in Berlin. We had, that's everything from raising the money to casting the movie to moving to Berlin to on and on and on. And it was an amazing process. It was quite difficult, but because we were solving problems, like how do we burn down that theater in a safe way, as an example. I had no idea, except that we were going to figure it out right along the way. And it was like the rolling 5 seconds. Every 5 seconds, it felt like you're solving a new creative problem. Yeah. But maybe one of the most sort of famous stories that came out of that is, how do we find Christoph Waltz, the guy who plays Colonel Landa in that movie? And so on basically 3 weeks after we had met, we had flown to Berlin and we started casting. And on day one, we had this great day of casting, but Quentin was unhappy because we had auditioned a few people to play that role. And he was quite concerned that he was just quite concerned because we're not gonna find the person. So 7 o'clock on that next Sunday morning, he calls me down to his hotel room and says, look, I think we should pack up and go home. This is the most interesting character, the best character I've ever written. And we're never going to find an actor to play this, because not only is it a great character, but he has to speak all these languages and so forth. So what I said to him was, look, why don't we do this? Let's just spend, we were financed, at that point, we were putting up the money ourselves for the prep. We hadn't made our deal yet to finance the movie. I said, this next week's going to cost us $100,000. Let's just spend the money, and all we'll do is look for this guy. And if he doesn't show up, you can, as he said, he wanted to publish the script. You can publish the script and we won't make the movie. 3 hours later, literally, we're casting, and it's just him and I in the room. There's no casting director who's in the room. There's no one videotaping it. He reads all the major parts. I read the smaller parts. And in walks this guy, Christoph Waltz. Nice to meet you, Mr. Tarantino. Nice to meet you, Mr. Bender. Blah, blah, blah. And as he starts to read in every language, I'm kicking him under the table, like, holy shit, this is amazing. And he walks out after this amazing audition. I said, why didn't you give it to him? And like, what's up? And he goes, listen, we said we give ourselves a week. Let's give ourselves a week. And nobody else walked in that room that was even close to a second possibility. And thank God we were able to make a deal, and he was available, and we made the movie with him. But literally, if he didn't walk in that room, we would have packed up and gone home, which is why it's so karmically great that he had won the Academy Award for that role. So anyway, that's one little tiny quick story. Sorry it took so long.
No worries. So I'm going to actually wrapping up. It's a great story to wrap up on. Anything you want to share with the Digital Davos community, specifically in messaging. And second is you had a great, you shared a bit of what Quentin told you on the first movie, right? Both of you continue to work on a long path together. Can you share a bit of that?
Oh, I'm not sure what story you're talking about.
How you two would end up, like after Pulp Fiction, both of you are going to end up working together for a very long time. I found that really inspiring.
Oh, I don't remember this.
It left an impression on me. But any message you'd like to give out to the digital?
No. I mean, it's I'm happy to be here, and I'm here making movies in Hollywood. If anyone wants to, there is a funny line, which is, if you want to become a millionaire in Hollywood, how do you become a millionaire in Hollywood? Start out as a billionaire.
Perfect. Sam, any last comments?
I like that. I would just say, when it comes to creative, that we all have our own processes, and those processes have to be respected. And if that means going to the park and smoking a joint and spending 3 hours with your headphones on, cool. I don't care how you come to an idea. I don't care what your process is. Just come and deliver. That's all. But you do not have to be sitting in my offices, at your desk, in a cubicle. All that matters is the delivery of the idea, and I don't give a shit how you get there. Just get there.
Fantastic. Look, the reality is creativity is a skill, and hopefully this conversation will inspire me. So I hope that it inspires the rest of the community, Digital Davos in general. Thank you so much, gentlemen. I really appreciate your time.